Welcome to Turek Books Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Joshua Turek. We're never going to read all the books we want, but when someone tells us about a book, that's its own valid form of experiencing it. Our guests come in to talk about the books that left lasting marks on them as readers, and that becomes a springboard to who they are, who I am, and maybe who all of us are. So sit back, relax, and enjoy it. And who knows, maybe you'll end up grabbing a book or two. Maybe you've read some of them, and it's nice to hear someone else talk about them. We want this to be like a book club, but without the guilt. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Turek Books. Seattle, October 25th. I'm going to be at the Hereafter doing stand-up comedy. I'd love if you came out. Tickets are available on my site. Same with you, Chicago. I'm going to be at the Comedy Bar November 8th and 9th. I'd love to have you there. Both shows are going to be a lot of fun. And Chicago, it's going to be days after the election, so I'll have a good view of the Civil War on my way over there, and I'll tell you about it. I'm most excited for our guest today. We're doing a special remote episode. He's a poet. He's one of my favorite people on the internet. I first came across one of his videos just through my feed and was blown away by his candor and his way with words and the way he sort of arranged his thoughts. And I was like, oh, that's what I think, but I haven't been able to think in a coherent way. He's also the one who inspired me to write my own poetry book. His new one is out. It's called You're Gonna Be Okay Because You're Fucked No Matter What. And he's joining us at 9 a.m. a day in the future in Melbourne, Australia. Darby Hudson.
Hey, Josh.
How you doing?
Hey, Josh.
That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, man.
I feel we know each other. We're also like kind of pen pals, but it's like through DM. We're not like writing things out, but it does feel like we're like pen pals. I've heard your voice. I listened to your podcast, which I love. If you're a creative person, check out Darby's podcast too, because they're short, but I really enjoy the way your thoughts kind of travel.
Yeah, I remember a friend shared, one of yours, the hard hat wearing Josh, and my friend said at the time, Darby, this is your brother. I was like, and I checked it out. I was going, holy shit, I rarely bookmark stuff back 4 years ago. And I was like, yeah, bookmark. That's how you use it.
Nice.
And so it's like, holy shit, this guy's saying the stuff that I want to say, but in a different way, in your own way. And it was really trippy. I loved it.
Yeah, it is trippy. I think there is like this weird relative quality to us, and yet like it's kind of this sweet spot where like we're both doing our own things. So like there's this mutual appreciation that I've felt in our interactions. It's been really cool and really heartening. Yeah, really inspiring for me. So I'm glad we get to actually talk, and what better excuse than to talk over the airwaves for other people to listen, instead of just being humans and calling one another. Let's commodify this friendship.
Yeah, excellent. I'll do it.
By the way, can you hear me okay over there?
Yeah. I've stretched my screen out, so you're a bit blurry, but I can see you.
Cool.
From where I am, but yeah. So
it's 9 a.m. your time on Tuesday, and it's 4 p.m. over here on the.
It may as well be the same day. Maybe I'm a bit early. I'm early, and you're in the afternoon. I always feel like I'm a bit of a child in the morning, and I become a jaded old man by mid-afternoon and onwards.
It's so true.
Yeah.
Even have you noticed like your face looks different by the end of the day?
Yeah. It's like I try not to look at myself in the bathroom mirror in the morning and in the evening. I just like, oh no, I keep them away from me.
I can just see the lines of like strain etched a little deeper on my face at the end of the day than when I first first meet the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. I mean, I don't even really know what all the time stuff means. I know it's all in accordance to the way the Earth is spinning, but yeah, I've sort of been trying to I think it's just fun to kind of muse about, but ultimately, like, the numbers we're putting to this don't mean anything actually.
Yeah, true. Um,
So where do you find yourself right now? You are in Melbourne, right?
yeah, Melbourne, Australia. Down, I've heard. I think Seinfeld called it the something like the bullshit end of the world or something like that. And
Okay.
some other celebrity, Hollywood celebrity from the '60s called it the hell end of the world when they filmed something down here in the '60s. I can't remember who it was. Maybe Cary Grant or someone.
Why is
But yeah,
everyone ripping on it
it, it,
so hard?
what's that?
Why is everyone ripping on it so hard?
It's the weather's nuts. It just goes from like I think Crowded House wrote 4 seasons in one day and about Melbourne. And it's kind of bipolar weather. It's all over the shop, and apparently Melbourne's got a bit of a reputation in Australia for where most of the artists end up in Melbourne. And
Okay.
I reckon it really stretches your emotions. The craziness, the crazy weather that goes from summer to winter in an hour. It's just nuts and all over the place. Does my head in sometimes, but I still love it. I still love it. But yeah, I turn into total moron if as soon as the weather's over 28 degrees. I can't
No.
think at all. I was going to hibernation. I was like, no, that's it. No more thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's not always a bad place to be. Shutting it
yeah,
down
I
early for the
know,
day.
I know. True, true. I love when my brain shuts up for a moment. It's kind of
Yeah, right.
it's a nice relief.
Yeah, let's crank it up now that you mention it. Crank up that thermostat.
Yeah, yep,
I'm
yeah.
also excited to have you on the podcast because I don't know a lot about your reading life except little things I've gleaned from your podcast that you've talked about. You were kind of saying you were on a less serious reading tip in one of your most recent episodes. I thought that was kind of interesting, and yeah,
Oh
I'm
yeah,
enthused to hear where you're at from that.
yeah. My mum, she really loved reading mythology, psychology, just all these. She read to learn like constantly, and she'd bookmark every single page, put little coloured post-it notes until a whole book, if you fanned it out, it would look like a peacock, and every single word was highlighted. It was like, what? You just highlighted a whole book. Like, what was the point? When my dad was the opposite, he just read kind of like, is it Terry? Not Terry Gilliam. Just like fantasy and weird cartoonish kind of stuff. And they they split up when I was a kid, but they were so chalk and cheese in their with their reading habits. Um, so mum always read to learn. So that's what I did for the first from 18 till about late 30s and into my early 40s and 48 now. I'm starting to go. I just want to. I just want to eat ice cream with my brain. I don't care if I get a sugar headache. I don't give a shit. But yeah, I used to read a lot of stuff to learn, and I still do. But yeah, I've started reading just more detective stuff and just fun stuff, page turners, and um, yeah, I just it's relaxing because I feel like my brain's doing a lot of the so much overthinking that it just needs a break. And it's like, oh, I didn't know books could be useful in a way. So, like the first half of my life, I read like my mum. I think the second half of my life, I'm doing my dad, and going from there. Yeah, but
That's cool.
yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I still like what I'll do with my reading habits is I'll read two bullshit books that are for fun, and then I'll force myself to read a classic or something that I'm supposed to read, or an important book. And nearly all the classics I've read, for me, 95% of them, I feel like I don't even know how this became a classic. But then occasionally one will pop up and I'll go, holy shit, that's amazing. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, well, you're like you said, you're a divorced child, so you're going back and forth to your parents' houses.
Yeah, true. Well said. Yeah, I totally feel that.
That's the rhythm. That's the rhythm. I'm a child of divorce, so yeah, I get it. Yeah, and it is funny, like the book that wins out. I got a stack of books on my nightstand right now, but the book that wins out is not the one that, like, when I built that stack, I was most hellbent on reading. It's just like, if you're being honest with yourself, it's going to be the one that's a little more fun than the rest of them that you get to first.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to, like, follow that impulse.
Yeah. So I feel guilty sometimes following that impulse. Like, I know I'm feeling, when I go to bed at night at the moment, I'm reading, those fun books. I always go, I've got to get back to reading serious stuff, serious literature. But nothing beats a stack of books by your bedside. It feels like going home, inside your home, when you go to bed at night and there's a big stack of books, especially with a bit of rain on the roof, like oral braille, and you're reading at the same time in bed. It's like I'm home inside home. It's like, the kitchen with some good smells comes a close second, but books by the bed in the bedroom is pretty. Yeah, I'm talking shit.
No, I'm listening. I'm feeling that. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir. Just know this entire conversation, you're preaching to the choir. So we already got the title of the episode. It was Ice Cream for Your Brain, which you gave us earlier.
Oh, yeah.
So no, I'm feeling it.
What are you reading at the moment that's ice cream for your brain, if you are?
So yeah, I just finished this book. And I have this whole ambitious stack, but someone left a comment on one of my videos, and then in another book I was reading a day later, that same book that was mentioned in the comment was mentioned in this other book, this more serious Mike Davis book I was reading. And the book is called Earth Abides, and it was written in 1949, and a pandemic sweeps through humanity and ends pretty much all of civilization. There's just a few people left. The main character is left because evidently he got a rattlesnake bite, and that might have been coincidentally what kept him from... So a really stupid device to get you into this story, but very beautiful, well thought out ideas about what would happen to the Earth. And the Earth is just waiting to reclaim its expressions from man. And so first you get that Earth starting to creep back in really quickly, and it's flooded with ants, but then the ants overpopulate themselves and lose out to the rats, and meanwhile the few humans who are left, they're living off of what was already left of civilization, canned foods, and the electricity is working for a while, and then it kind of shorts out, and the water is being delivered to the sinks for a while, and then a pipe, some welding thing that had only been patchworked that never got finished, gives way, and so the water stops flowing. And then, through the generations of the book, you start to see the absence of civilization, the living off of civilization, but then also like, hey, the only thing holding up civilization are the people, and once those people go, it slips away from them too. And by the end, this main character's great grandkids, they're essentially living off the land in sort of like a much more indigenous way. And kind of exceptional. It was honestly therapeutic living in the day and age we are, where it feels like so much is fraught with existential issues, whether it be war or climate or any other thing in our face all the time. This book was therapeutic in the idea that, oh, okay, cool. Like,
this happened 70 years ago in someone's head.
Right?
Yeah, it's a relief.
A relief. Yeah, and so I've found some relief in this specific moment through this book. And no, was it perfect? No, and I didn't like the main character. I'm not sure he was supposed to be likable. I don't think you need a likable main character. But yeah, so that one won out, and I zipped through it. It was like, oh yeah, okay, I am a fast reader when it's a book that's sort of meant to be read. Without slowing down too much on it. But yeah, that feeling was good. You had mentioned like once in a while a classic will hit you, and I'm not to put you on the spot because it's always tough to recall them, but like, are there any classic books that you've read that you're like, oh yeah, okay, they got to something there?
Yeah, I guess I don't know if it's a classic yet, but I love that Cormac McCarthy's The Road. That was kind of written recently, like 2008 or whatever. But it's one of my favorite one of my old favorites, sort of semi-old favorites.
Yeah,
I know he was kind of inspired by Faulkner, who I'm trying to read at the moment, but I'm struggling to read his Cormac McCarthy's influence. But yeah, it's kind of like a is it dystopia? I don't know that.
Yeah, I think so.
Pretty famous, but it's so beautifully written, almost Old Testament style, and I've read it maybe 6 or 7 times, and now I just don't read it. I'll just open a page and just read a page and then close it and then that's it. Yeah, it's just incredible writing. It's like the whole book's a poem, but not. It's still readable enough to not have to be bogged down in each sentence. But I just go, holy shit, this guy's. It's not really. I wouldn't say it's a. Maybe something needs to.
I think it's a new classic.
It's a new classic, yeah.
Yeah.
And I read that Celine's Journey to the End of the Night, which got banned at the time, and it's. I guess in these current times, it would be deemed like problematic, but that was written in the 30s or whatever, and I was laughing so hard. It's so dark and black, and it's been regarded as a classic, but that was only a recent read, and I was like, holy shit, this is funnier than half the new books or anything I've read in a long time. I was kind of nearly crying with laughter.
Wow.
Some of it. It's fun. Yeah.
Isn't that wild? Someone 100 years ago?
What's that?
Just someone 100 years ago could make you laugh.
Yeah. I hadn't read. I haven't. No one's made me laugh that much in a book in a long time, and I was like, holy shit. No wonder it got banned at the time. But apart from classics,
It's funny, like thinking about funny books, like books that make me laugh. Yeah, there are very few. And I think one of the few books that writers who actually really made me laugh is also another. I wouldn't call him a banned author by any means, but he definitely there's a definite stigma to liking his books, and that's David Foster Wallace. I always found his sense of humor so incredible, and like you said, just very, very dark, very inverted, like aware of everything from every angle. He wrote his first novel was called The Broom of the System, and you're a third of the way into the novel, and then suddenly he's on a plane or something, and he describes the black sands of the Ohio desert. And Ohio in the United States is not a desert at all. And so the fact that he just but it's also like this state that everyone makes fun of for so many different reasons. And the fact that he envisioned this black sand desert but doesn't ever really point to it too much after that. It was just so funny to me. And I remember crying, like laughing. And it's a real special thing because it is more rare, I think, in books.
Yeah.
Pretty cool when it happens, though.
Yeah, it is. It's super rare.
And the books that call themselves humor books, I mean, you're more likely to laugh at the Bible than you are the humor section.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I always feel like a lot of when humor is the the first the first thing that people want to try and write. This, I'm not expressing this well, but when it's the main focus, I rarely find it funny. But if it comes from an interesting idea first, and then the humor is the byproduct of an interesting idea, then I find that funny. But often it's that people will I just want to be funny, and then I find that not funny. But
Yeah.
it's an interesting idea that gives birth to something else. Then I find that or semi interesting or accidentally funny, like my mum was most of her life. She was hilarious. she was the funniest. Yeah. Anyway.
No, I love that. It even like when you're scrolling on like Netflix to watch something, and there's the comedy section and the drama. I'm often like, but wait, that drama movie's funnier than the comedy movie. You know what I mean? To your
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, totally. I rewatched The Sopranos for the first time in 20 years last year, and I'd forgotten how funny it was. Like
Mm.
I was cry laughing in some parts of it.
Yeah, that's a great
Um,
example.
yeah, I was like, holy shit, this is actually a comedy. But anyway,
Yeah. Well, you know, comedy thrives on tension. And like,
yeah,
yeah. So, you know, there has to be tension. And yeah, it could just be a little too flabby if it just starts with wanting to make someone laugh, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and it's funny, like at the beginning of the podcast, me advertising my stand-up shows because I am never funny on this podcast. I don't feel the urge to be funny. That's not why, what this is about. I don't know. It's interesting.
yeah. No, I've yeah, I get it. You just like I think when we were messaging a few weeks ago about how you're just talking shit, and sometimes something happens that's interesting or funny, or sometimes it's not. But it's you just being a person, and that's the best stuff is just talking shit, and then sometimes something interesting happens from that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
my friend Corey, who was on a couple weeks ago, we've often talked about how like just because we're comedians, like the cook at the bar we're eating at, he is, I guarantee you, funnier than us. It's just we're just paying attention to the moments and like stringing them out and arranging them as a
yeah,
craft, but we're not like funnier than other people.
yeah,
It's just more
yeah,
about
yeah.
awareness. Like
Yeah, the
you were saying,
funniest.
your mom.
Yeah, yeah, true. Your mate Corey, he's not a like a comedian. He's just a person who's funny. Not just. I mean,
Oh no,
just
Corey
like a
is a
person.
comedian. No, he is a comedian. But yeah,
Oh right.
when we hang out, we're like not making each other laugh. We're like trying to solve the world's problems,
Yeah,
And then the
yeah.
laughter comes through the absurdity of two people sitting there trying to do that.
Ah, excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I saw you had the road near you. Is there
Oh
anything?
yeah. I've got a bunch of books. So this is the ice cream book. Um, she's written a whole lot of them. Freida Mcfadden. She's self-publishing up until a few years ago. Now she sold like millions of her books, and they're kind of written in a like she writes these mystery, thrillery kind of things in the sort of in the vein of Gone Girl. I think she was inspired by that stuff from the very few interviews I've read with her. But she's really basic to read, and in a kind of it almost feels like sometimes I feel like, am I reading? Is this a like a romance novel in disguise as a mystery, or And I want to actually go to Kmart or wherever and buy a few Mills and Boon just to read, just to see what it's doing. I feel like I owe it to myself to go there as well. Um, but yeah, it's just so simple to read. It feels like it's written like an 8-year-old could read it, and and like if I had to rate it on Goodreads, that my literature brain would give it a 2 star, but my ice cream brain would give it a 6 out of 5. And so it's like, I'm not going to I'm not going to rate it because it's just so it's there. She writes wonderfully comforting spoon feeds. Like I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. Now I'm going to tell you what's happening. Now I'm going to tell you what I've just done. It's not, yeah, it's so basic. Yeah, I love her stuff, and she just kind of she seems like she's writing 3 of them a year or some shit. And
Wow.
so I don't know if a machine's writing it, but it works. It works for me. But mate, sometimes it makes me think, oh mate, maybe I'm allowed to publish 2 or 3 books of poetry a year. Someone's doing that, and I'm buying all her books at the moment, and she's
Yeah.
popping out 3 a year. Maybe I'll just do that with my poetry. Hey, why not?
Why not?
But
Well, it sounds like she's
yeah,
also writing things in a simple enough way that she can, right?
yeah,
Like, I don't know if she has built-in devices that she knows how to use and then just plug and play or what, but yeah, you start to wonder, like, okay, do they start bringing in ghostwriters at a
yeah,
certain point of popularity, like Tom Clancy books? Did Tom Clancy write all of those books? I don't know.
yeah. That's what I've been thinking with Freida. Like I'm going, how can you write? I mean, they're very simply written and fun to read, but I don't know how she's doing three books a year. They're pretty solid in terms of the ideas. There's at least a couple of good solid ideas in each of them. But I was like, how do you do that? I don't know. But yeah, you're right.
And there's
Ghostwriters.
a
Is there
global
something else going
Adderall
on?
there's a global Adderall shortage, so I don't know. Maybe all
Oh,
the serial authors are the ones taking all the legal speed for everyone else. I don't from everyone else who needs it. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's
Dang.
a dude who wrote on the road famously wrote it on speed or something. On
Wait.
a
Oh yeah,
40,
Jack Kerouac.
yeah, 48-hour speed freak
Yeah, on like
typewriter
one long
session.
sheet of paper or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, just do that.
Yeah.
Oh, but
I
yeah,
mean,
like before I read this, I was starting to go. I just want to read something that's when I was like I bought Jung's Red Book after Nick Pizzolatto, who wrote True Detective, who I love. I love his stuff. He's the True Detective #1, and I read his short stories and Galveston, and I tried reading Jung's Red Book, which was it's a massive. It's actually down amongst my boxes down there. I won't pick it up, but it's yeah, I was only absorbing or understanding 5% of what he wrote,
hmm.
but the book as object and some of those little thoughts that I was able to actually understand with my big head and the tiny brain inside it, that was yeah beautiful. But yeah, but I was just going on a tangent then. But when I started going, I just want to read something for fun. Follow my dad's footsteps. I started reading crime and detective stuff, and I started off with my girlfriend's book, Thomas Harris, who wrote Silence of the Lambs trilogy. And there's this Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and then there's a third one that I haven't read. But I read the first one, which is Red Dragon, it's incredible. It was written in the early '80s, and I read the whole thing, and I love a beautiful detective novel because I kind of feel that's what poets do. We're detectives, but we're not here to solve the mystery. We're here to deepen the mystery.
Hmm.
And I love when I read it, I went the one scene in that Red Dragon book of the first one or whatever it was. Um, it was he based the whole book on this one scene that came into his head, and it's the detective going into a dark house and just looking at the clues. And after I read that after his explanation after I'd finished it, and I went, that makes sense. Everything came from that moment and was born from that. And I loved that idea of I just I loved how he gave birth to that first book through just the pure mystery of a detective inside a dark house, and everything beautifully came from that. But so I got into detective novels because it didn't feel like much of a stretch from being a poet. You're a detective too, Josh. We're detectives. That's what I reckon. I feel like we are. So in a weird way. But
Hot
anyway,
on the case.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. You said detectives are looking to solve the mystery, poets are trying to deepen the mystery.
I feel like that's kind of our job sometimes when we're doing it well. Like when I'm doing it well, but I often sometimes I forget that, and I go, oh, this is a poem I wrote, or I knew where this led. I knew where it was going to go from the start, so it was a bullshit poem. My favorite stuff is where I'm following the footsteps in the dirt and then they disappear, and they're my favorites. Where that's the feeling I get. I have no idea where one line goes and leads to the next. And like I've said before, my worst poems are like word salad, and my best stuff is closer to music. But
Mm.
the ones closer to music are they're the 2%, and the rest of them are bullshit. The rest of them are bullshit. I feel like I'm just trying to con the audience. But
I'm trying to
anyway.
think after hearing you say that why it feels so reassuring to have the mystery deepened. And the quick answer my brain came up with is like because it points to the fact that there is a mystery. And
Yeah.
and being assured that you are part of a great mystery is a good feeling because it places you into a world of intention and interrelation.
I love that. Yeah.
But also, it's just cool to think that you're in a mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Questions, because
yeah.
it brings up questions, and those are endlessly entertaining. And they're
Yeah.
also, we thrive on curiosity.
Yeah, there's so many exclamation marks in the world and not enough question marks. Where
Mm,
Google has the answers to everything, and so there's less. It feels like there's less mystery these in the last 10, 15 years, which is why I love other ice cream shows like Lost, which tried to do that. It never had. You could tell it had zero intention of solving a thing. And I love David Lynch for the same reason. I love David Lynch. Like maybe not as much as I used to, but I love. He does the same thing. He's there to do that. I think that's the feeling
That's
I
such
get.
a good point. Yeah, and that makes me feel so much better about watching every episode of Lost and feeling lost by the end of it. Is like, yeah, no, they just wanted to keep creating more questions. No, that actually gives me some peace of mind. Well, and you saying there's more exclamation marks than there are question marks. I've found like my big luxury is like when I'm talking to someone and we don't know the answer to something, instead of Googling it, we just don't know, or we like accept the half truth that we do know. And there's a real luxury to not Googling it and just being like, okay, yeah, let's roll with your interpretation because all
I
that really
love that.
exists in this conversation is this conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Yeah.
when like a mate will send me something that I have no idea about, and I won't. And instead of texting him back saying, "Oh, I just googled it," oh yeah, or just pretending that I know because I just googled it, I'll ask him. "Oh, what is that?" So
Yes.
I'll let it if I'll let whoever I'm texting explain it to me rather than me immediately try to Google it. I love
Yeah,
yeah let
I like my friends more than I like a an algorithmic search engine that's just gonna try to sell me things.
yeah.
With yeah, so true, so true.
Yeah.
Like, give me the plain redundancies. Like, coming through my friend, that means something.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool.
The beautiful misinformation of the heart. I
Oh,
love that. I love the old mystery. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. So yeah, I love detective novels for that reason, because I feel like they're trying to grasp at something that, yeah, the good ones feel like they never provide the answer for me. So are you watching Lost, did you say, at the
no, I
moment?
mean, I did. Like, 10
Oh,
years
you
after it
did.
came out, I binge watched all of it, having seen none of it. And yeah, I
Yeah.
got really hooked on it. But then, like, yeah, I was dissatisfied with the ending because it,
Yeah.
I was like, this, I don't know, like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no. And I mean, did you watch Game of Thrones?
I watched the first few seasons, then I went through a breakup, and that sort of ruined a whole lot of patterns and
Mm.
in my life, and I've just forgot to watch the rest of it. But I was enjoying it.
it,
Yeah,
it was
at the time.
enjoyable. It got a little weird in the seasons right in the middle. And then, yeah, you probably heard everyone was dissatisfied with the conclusion of Game of Thrones. And, well, I
Yeah.
won't spoil it for you, but I actually, as I reflect on the conclusion of it more and more, I enjoy it for what it was lacking, and how sort of the mediocre kind of took took the reins after the heroes kind of died off. It felt kind of true to form, and yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know why I
Yeah.
bring that up. I'm sure it was related to what we were just talking about, but maybe I'm just trying to do
No,
some
no, no. It makes
TV
sense. Yeah, that
therapy with you,
just that third act of anything, it doesn't really matter if it's
right?
solved or unsolved. The lead up to it always feels beautiful. Um, yeah, like the Titanic. We all know what's going to happen in that movie, and I don't really care about the last third of most most movies. Yeah, I was going to say, what I love about David Lynch is he creates this perfect circle of seeming logic, but it's almost like broken. But
Mm.
in the mind somehow completes the circle, but then is confused because it doesn't quite add up, but it does. It's like 1 plus 1 is sort of equaling 2, but I love how it confuses the shit out of everyone. And I love how many YouTubes are online trying to explain rationally David Lynch's stuff, and that always amuses me, and I always feel a bit arrogant, sniggering at the length of those explanation YouTube videos. I just love that his ability to create beautiful questions are amazing. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's such a good way of articulating it. I saw Mulholland Drive as a young man with no real knowledge of him, and but people had been talking about Mulholland Drive, and yeah, to this day, the like question marks from that movie could drive me kind of mad. But also, like, my kind of joking thought is like, well, why does he get to go make films of his dreams with a real
yeah,
budget? Why can't the rest of us just, because that no one ever wants to hear you tell them about their dream. You're like, oh, I had the craziest dream, and then the person's like, here we go. But that's
yeah,
just when David Lynch is just getting started. He's in pre-production at that point.
yeah,
But yeah, I
yeah,
appreciate him too. And Twin Peaks, like, as you were describing your interpretation of him, I was like, yes, that is Twin Peaks, like that. And that, to me, I love that world he created, and
yeah,
sort of let not be created too.
yeah. Yeah, you pretty much live on the set. You kind of live on the set.
Truly. Well, his whole thing, like, he always talks about the light in LA, and like he says, everyone's attracted to the light, and it's true. The lighting really is different everywhere you go. In LA, just has that like ultra clarity,
Wow.
which is so interesting because there's like, then within that clarity comes the noir elements, the shadows, specifically like the night contrast to that daily light. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's really interesting how you look different in different places you go throughout the world. In LA just happens to be ideal for the film that came out here to escape Thomas Edison's patents on the East Coast. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, that sort of ceaseless sunshine that allowed them to make more films per year than they could elsewhere.
Ah, right.
Um,
Yeah, that makes like a lot. Yeah, like logistical sense.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
like you're talking about the inconsistencies of Melbourne and yeah,
yeah,
these and the Hollywood people complaining about that. Probably no coincidence.
yeah, it's yeah. Ah,
Well, that's cool. I love the thoughts on the detective stuff. That's such a cool way of looking at it. Um, I'm curious if you have anything else in your mysterious
yeah.
off-camera stack.
I read the Neverending Story. I always wanted to read it. Oh, my cat's having a look around my
Okay.
junk heap. I read the Neverending Story for the first time a few months back because I love the movie as a kid. I loved it because I was an 80s kid. I was born in 75, but I was always fascinated by the villain, which is an existential villain, the Nothing, which kind of absorbs. It's like a black hole that takes just steals creativity, steals artists. And it felt really prescient to today. It feels like there's this vacuum of a whole lot of for me, but a lot of bad art. Like there wasn't 10, 20 years ago, but it feels like there is seems to be a lot now. And the the villain from the Neverending Story called the Nothing just sweeps across the magical land of Fantasia in the movie or Fantastica in the book, and and it and it's yeah, it intrigued me. So I had to read the book and find out more about it. And actually, I pulled some quotes from the book, if you don't mind me, if I read some of them.
Please.
Um, it was so good. Let me have a look. Where is it? Here we go. Oh no, never-ending story. So yeah, you're real in Fantastica, but when you travel through the nothing, you won't be real anymore, and you land on Earth as a lie. And so you're basically a poem in this magical world. But when the nothing eats you up, you turn into a human and you land on the world in the form of a lie. And it says here, a leap into the nothing is a portal to the earth, and once through, the dreams, poetic inventions, characters in the never-ending story become human. And the nothing makes humans blind, so they can no longer distinguish between reality and illusion. You bring delusion, madness, and fear into the world where there is nothing to fear, desires for vain, hurtful things, despairing thoughts where there is no reason for despair. You become a nameless servant of power with no will of your own. And then, as a human in the world, you will help persuade people to buy things they don't need or hate things they know nothing about or hold beliefs that make them easy to handle or doubt the truths that might save them. The human world is full of weak minded people who think they're as clever as can be and are convinced that it's terribly important to persuade even the children that Fantastica does not exist. When you go to Earth, you become a lie, either ugly, stupid, clever, or a beautiful lie, and your story will go on forever in the form of a lie. When it comes to controlling human beings, there is no better instrument than lies because you see, humans live by beliefs, and beliefs can be manipulated. Yeah, that was some of my favorite bits from the
Wow.
Neverending Story. But yeah,
He
it's a beautiful book, and it actually made me teary towards the end because the main character in it is innocent, and then he becomes corrupted by the power in and blah blah blah. It's a beautiful book and much better than I thought. There are a lot of bits in it that I felt just went on too long. Like I sometimes fantasy novels can real as soon as I'm hearing about troglodyte, I don't know, goblins and stuff, I'm lost. It's like, it's not real. I don't care. It's a fantasy, but when it starts to get into some interesting territory, that yeah, the bits that were great were incredible, and then there was a lot of a slog through as well that was
hmm.
like, yeah. But
Well,
yeah, that's I read
it's
that, and that's yeah, beautiful book.
it's funny how
Yeah,
you were like you tune out at goblins and things that aren't real, but you're like, but nothing.
Yeah,
that
totally.
Give me some more nothing. Nothing is real.
Well spotted. That's so true.
No, it's just the philosopher in you, and like as you were reading that passage, it connected me to you because I know like you'd had like jobs and you said you were no good at like working in ad agencies, and I feel like that author was like speaking to that mentality of like being an ad man the second you come into the world. You're trying to sell someone something as a human in the way that it's constructed, but the magic exists outside of trying to sell ourselves to people or trying to sell products to people. So it's cool how I don't know, in my mind I drew that connection to like your personal story.
Working in advertising was pretty trippy. I always ended up the criticism I always got was like, Darby, you're writing about Darbyland. You're not writing about Revlon or Kmart or whatever the fuck I was writing about at the time. I just kept going into Darbyland and writing my little how I said. And so eventually I just like, it was interesting. It was an amazing learning experience about ideas and how you can't be precious about them, and how it often takes 100 ideas to write one good one, and the work ethic involved to create ideas. That was the beautiful thing about advertising, because I learned about not being precious about ideas and the incredible work ethic that you need to create ideas. But in terms of a lot of the people that attracted, I didn't understand. I got in there by writing a bullshit resume and applying for every single job in the newspaper, 2,500 jobs, with a stupid resume that included just my interests, like pushing buttons with real smooth push button action, comparing data with completely irrelevant other data, the enjoyment of being taller than my father, getting a little bit wet in the rain and quickly running inside. And I just applied for every single job, and advertising took me, and I went, okay, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. And so that's how I got in. I sort of felt falling upwards or falling sideways into it. But I learned a lot, and I remember 5 or 6 years ago I would have been embarrassed to say that I worked in advertising, but now I go, no, actually I learned a lot. It was an amazing experience. There was some bits I didn't like about it, and it's a hard place to work. But yeah, it's part of what happened, and I like it.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I just thought that passage was like, it reminded me of like that land.
The lies that you sell.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and, you sell fear and with the promise to fix it.
Well, and even as a creative person now, like, or even as a doctor or a lawyer, everything is so self-promotional now that there is a level of marketing in everything that we do, and you try to find the sincerity within it, but it's like even the way we all speak to each other, we're always like teeing up ideas almost as if they're products at times. And I don't know, you reading the passage you read sort of awakened some of those thoughts. Just interesting. And interesting that this movie you loved as a kid, you visited the book as an adult and found all these sort of new things, and then
the Nothing and Goblins. I love that. I love that. I understand the Nothing. I totally understand it. I'll send you those little passages that I gutted from the book. But it's worth reading the whole thing.
And the Nothing reminds me of this time I was really depressed in my 20s, and I went down to the beach and was like exercising, and life is meaningless, and then like at some point, in a very kind of simple way of just using language to turn it around, I thought, well, if it's meaningless, that means it's less of meaning, which means that meaning exists. So, even meaninglessness is still that still is something. it's embodied somehow. Yeah, just playing with the word, I somehow found some clarity that made me feel better.
Yeah, I love that. That's it. It reminds me of Eckhart Tolle said. He said something. He was sitting on a park bench, suicidal, and he said something like, I, I don't, I don't like who I am, or something like that. But then he went, "Who's the I and who's the person I'm talking to?" And he separated. But what you're saying, but in a different kind of way, the meaning and the less of it, and the semiotics involved in that is really so interesting how he's like able to surgically pull them apart and your heart to reread them in a way that repaired you like the Terminator fixing itself.
I've been
That's
thinking,
great. I
I
love
thought
it.
about it this morning, just how like we use language to kind of cope with what's here or what used to be here. And like I know it's to communicate ideas and find mutual agreement with one another, but yeah, I also think language is just like, and words are kind of these coping devices if we fall in love with them and figure out how to use them.
Yeah. I love words as medicine. I've always thought of them as medicine, and I'm hearing it more and more. People like pharmacists prescribing books, or
Mm.
doctors prescribing poetry and books and stuff. Like for me, Michael Leunig in my 20s was that medicine. And then Bukowski in my 30s was that medicine. So I've had my medicine books as well that have gone, Darby, it's all right. Everything, it's going to be okay. You've these weird thoughts, I've had them too, and no one else will tell you them because they're banned. But it's all right. You've had them. I've had them as well. Don't stress. But yeah, there's what books have been absolute medicine, have saved you from the brink for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, you brought up Eckhart Tolle, and that made me think of like when those books first came out, how it was like you just see like people on the beach reading those books, and then like I remember reading those books and being like, oh, there's some useful ideas, but in my mind is so literal that I'm just like, in a certain sense, like, wait, how do I apply this mind state to my behavior? And there was always a disconnect. But yeah, like you brought up Bukowski and stuff in fiction and some of these other presentations that weren't necessarily self-help, you do find help through just kind of identifying with the characters. I think I found patches all over. I don't know that
Yeah,
there's like seminal books, but I think about
yeah,
George Saunders, his collection of essays, The Brain Dead Megaphone, and he's talking about the Lotus Boy, who's I may have misused the title, but a boy who's just been meditating under a tree in Southeast Asia for some inordinate amount of time, and the reflections that George Saunders is walking through about love and loss as he's doing it, and just feeling um, like almost it's instructive when someone can make beauty out of the world for you, and like you
yeah,
said, make medicine out of the words. But yeah, like my previous guest Ruby brought in a Miranda July book, and like definitely reading her things similar to what you're talking about, like that weirdness where you're like, oh, I've had that thought before and never been able to express it, or no, I've been on a train of thought like that, but no one's ever really like been the conductor on it.
yeah.
It's really cool. But yeah, I think if over the next week, if I like think it through, I'll be able to like, maybe like hit on the exact books that landed with me in that way. Do you? I mean, you told
Yeah.
us. I'd never heard of Michael Leunig, who
I
you're saying.
Yeah, Michael Leunig. This is from the 70s. But he's been making books forever, and he just got fired by The Age, our local big newspaper. He was just he's always just marched to his own beat and said really beautiful things. Like at one point in Australia, there were probably millions of fridges had his cartoons cut out and put on their fridges. You walk into anyone's place in the early '90s. He's kind of like a philosopher cartoonist.
Cool.
But and yeah, Mum. I felt like I got an education from him because Mum would force feed me his stuff. But yeah, his stuff from the '80s and the '90s was really incredible. But yeah, and helped me through my 20s, I guess. So yeah, a lot of his stuff.
That's so
But
cool.
yeah, I'll have to check out that George Saunders short stories book you
Yeah,
mentioned.
these
You
were
had
the
mentioned him before, and I did
I
try
I
reading novels.
I'm always mentioning him. His short story books are great and they're very funny actually too. But he wrote one, at least, no, he's written a couple nonfiction books. And yeah, the nonfiction essays were the ones that really were like, oh, wow, okay, this is, yeah, he just brought some ideas that were like, okay. But yeah, now it's going to nag at me that I didn't have a perfect answer for you there too, where I'm like,
Oh no,
this
I
person.
sort of jumped backwards and forwards, and
No,
yeah,
but
all good.
I love the question, and so I'm like, damn,
Yeah,
who healed me?
we're
And
all
yeah,
over the place,
I
all
really
over
do
the
think it
place.
is a collection of different
Yeah,
voices. And now, like, I'll say the books I find most healing, which are also the most difficult, are like nonfiction books speaking to the decay of decency in our world and the top down corruption. And I feel a lot as horrible as it is recognizing so many incongruities in our society. I also feel an immense relief when someone can point out to me why, and also, yeah, speak to the truth of things. I'm reading a lot of
yeah,
indigenous history in specific to North America, and like
yeah,
that colonial past isn't that past, and like there are these feelings in our society that if you were to just take our education at face value, we would never be able to pinpoint. Chris Hedges is another person who I bring up a lot, and the way he talks about, I'm over here in the American Empire on a Monday, Darby. It's bleak if you're paying too much attention, but when someone speaks truth to it, I feel better about it, even if it makes the problem deeper. Like you were saying, the deeper deepens the mystery. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know, but that's just the way my mind works.
Oh, I love the idea of yes, what you're saying. How it's a kind of relief to hear that speaking to the truth of something. I've always thought all I need to stay sane each day is to either write something that's unbelievably true or hear it from anywhere. It doesn't
Mm.
matter where it comes from. As long as I hear a single line of truth a day, and even better, one after the other, even if they're unrelated truths, I feel like a burden's been lifted from me just to
Yes.
hear truth after truth, even if they're nothing to do with each other, but they're all true, and that's the denominator. It feels it's like, oh, thank God.
Well, and it's a
It
it's a
feels
it's
good.
a it's applicable to that passage you read in the Neverending Story too. And as you were reading it, one idea that came into my head was like, okay, if we come here with all these lies, yeah, maybe it sounds like the mission is to continue trying to find something closer to the truth, whatever that means to
Yeah,
each of us.
yeah, yeah.
And I like that
Um,
mission. I choose to accept that mission, It's like in the little like spy part of the brain.
I love that. You already do that for me with your work. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah, likewise.
I love yes, Celine's journey to the end of the night and Michael Ende, Neverending Story. They talk really beautifully about lies and the power of the lie. And and I loved that denominator between those two books. And I find it interesting how social media is like the greatest lying machine we've e- we've ever we've ever had. So it's yeah, we're kind of starving for the truth. Like, and so I'm not surprised that poets are sort of having a bit of a renaissance, especially
Mm.
online social media poets and stuff. not the ones that apply for government grants and win the right awards. I feel like, yeah, no, I'm not surprised in a way. Like, and comedians are basically poets. They say truths that result in the staccato sound that comes out of our mouth in the form of aha moments over and over again. Ah ha ha ha. But yeah. But
That's
yeah,
really cool.
I love Bukowski's ability to say a lot of one true thing after the other as well. Like I've always, sometimes I get annoyed by him, and I've got to have a break from him for a couple of years and go, never reading that guy again. And then I'll come back to him with new lived life, and I'll go, holy shit, he said some, yeah. Anyway,
No, I feel that, and yeah, it's almost like a brave statement to say you like Bukowski at this point, because he's sort of been rewritten and moralized, and all rightfully so in some ways. But yeah, in my 20s, riding the bus around LA, he was like a companion. When I first found his books, I would go to the library and read all of them, because it was just like, oh, okay, yeah, here's a guy who's like struggling through his work life and not enjoying it, and being honest about not enjoying it, and preferring to
yeah,
sleep on a bench instead of pretending to enjoy work. And like that, in this world that like drives us into a work life whether we want it or not, yeah, that was really nice to just be like, okay, cool. No, so there is like, people do feel this way, because I feel like everywhere I've worked, I've been like the weakest coworker. I'm like, like, oh, why are they so, like, no one's complaining as articulately as I am. Everyone's stronger than me. And it's like, well, no, everyone's just doing what they got to do.
Yeah,
in a different
but
way.
no, you're right about Bukowski. If I've ever mentioned him on my stories or whatever, I'll get a series of messages, kind of tutting me and telling me off. And I posted on a story. I think I mentioned it to you, not only last week. I posted on a story that how someone said, a few people have said to me, "You're like a less toxic version of Bukowski." And on my story, I wrote, "Some people say this, but really, I'm just a less truthful version of Bukowski." And you can interchange the word toxic for truth, and how truth has become toxic, and not all the time. Of course, there is real toxicity as well. It's not always interchangeable, but that's how I feel with the current times.
Well,
But
it is
anyway,
interesting. I mean, Bukowski, like, yeah, there's recorded evidence of him being toxic, and
yeah, you can see, see it online.
It's like, it's real.
Yeah,
but at the
it's
same
real.
time, like, God, that idea that you're talking about, it's like, yeah, it's like almost cringe for a person to have been a person now. Like, it's like kind of cringe. It's embarrassing that Bukowski was as sincere as he was to people who are in the know, And it's like you were talking earlier to that point, and it's the point I keep making, how like we really are awash in a neutrality, and it's a market-driven neutral world that doesn't want to take chances in any particular direction, because then you minimize the ability to sell to the most people. And yeah, like just being a person, a fully formed, flawed, even a fucked up person, is like so cringe now. It's like, oh, this is embarrassing. Bukowski is embarrassing because he embodied unlikability and had the nerve to tell us about it. It's just interesting.
Yeah. I think, yeah. It's true. There's also that idea of how I'm not really up with it, but it feels like there's this new thing towards, how dare anyone be individualistic or individualism. And isn't that the artist's role, to make the personal universal? And sometimes I feel like there's a kind of a death of the artist, and it's been regarded as cringy, because all of a sudden, I I shouldn't really even
No,
talk about it because I
no,
don't
I
know
think
where I'm
that's
going
really
with it.
interesting, and I think it could be in how you're interpreting individualism, because like to me, I harp on individualism, but it's not the
Oh,
kind that's trying to make the personal universal, like you
oh yeah,
said.
that's what I mean about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
exactly, and that to
personal
me is actually the
universal.
opposite. That's like
Oh,
that's a
right.
communal
Yeah,
vision,
yeah.
whereas
I do.
like individualism is the talking inward world of that expands the ego and continues isolating you from the universal
Ah, right.
as
Yeah,
a
yeah. I don't mean. I don't. Yeah. I
I
did.
mean,
I probably didn't understand the exact definition of it, but
well,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. That's
I think it's probably open to interpretation, and I think certain people when they bring it up they might mean it in different ways, but yeah, to me the individualism that I rail against is like the one that as you and I just read The Society of the Spectacle, which, speaking to what you were talking about with the Young book earlier, the Red book, like
right. Yeah.
kept with it the first two chapters, totally could not wrap my brain around these concepts for the most of the book and came around at the end. But one great point was like the way the division of labor happened in a factory. And instead of being a skilled person in the world, you were given one task that has been projected onto our personal being, our personalities, our lives, the way we express ourselves, and the way
Yeah.
that we're fed media is through that same division of labor. And that to me, to isolate us and make us, individualized consumers rather than part of a community and a collective.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
to me is what I when I speak to individualism rail against, but I
Yeah.
can't speak for
I've
everyone else.
actually heard you talk about individualism, so yeah, I've listened to a lot of the podcast, but I haven't. Yeah. Anyway.
No, I don't think
But
I've really talked about it too much. I guess I
yeah.
just mean in my head or something.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Oh.
no, I know what you're saying because yeah, scrubbing the like the uniqueness of each person out in exchange for like a neutral vision that kind of puts you in your little cubby is is damning.
Yeah, that's where I guess I'm coming from. Yeah, sometimes I feel like, oh, is it bad to be is it bad to be an artist now? Is it bad? That's how I was like, is that what's happened? But
Well, it's always
nah.
been bad to be an artist, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ah,
Do you have anything else
yeah.
book
I've
wise?
got so there's the Little Prince, which is kind of everyone's. That I kind of might feel like Michael Leunig and him went together. I won't go on
Okay.
about that. There was Billy Collins, who was he's a poet from New York or whatever. Kind of feel like his stuff. For me, that was the first introduction to poetry for me because he was kind of a best-selling first $1 million advance poet from New York. He kind of writes New Yorker cartoons, but as poems.
Mm.
You probably know of him. He's very super popular, very easy to read.
Do you read
A
a
lot.
lot of poetry as a poet?
I I did from maybe 2010 to 12, and then I just stopped. But it was really good at the time, and I loved it. There was a lot of stuff like the modernists from the last century sort of went over my head a bit. Um, I, a lot of it I didn't understand. I just yeah, it was a bit of a struggle. I liked Mark Tredinnick. He's an Australian poet. Um, I feel like him and Cormac McCarthy. Every time I read either of their books, they strengthen something in my brain, rewire it, and just reading one of their perfect sentences. Uh, I feel like I've absorbed like smart pills, and that lasts for about a day, and then I go back to a bit dumb again. But if I read stupid poetry that I don't get or I don't like, or it actually subtracts something from me, and I feel dumber for it. So I almost can't like even though I've there's a lot of poetry online, and I don't want to read it in fear of um getting. Oh, this sounds so arrogant. It sounds so arrogant, but of getting dumber and going,
Like
so it is kind of an arrogant thing to say, but I need to read stuff that I know that it will strengthen my brain, and I've waded through so much shit for so long that I know that that's how my brain works. If I read too much shit, I'm going to kill my ability to write for a few days.
Well, you have a great antenna. You
Sorry?
have like a great antenna, and I feel like what makes it great is probably an ultra sensitivity. And so you're like aware of that sensitivity, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to like feel what I read. And that isn't, I got to be a little like careful about where I turn that antenna to for that reason.
Yeah. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, you get it. With everything I know, with the bits and pieces we've swapped and stuff, I feel like you understand that as well. So I can hear the neighbours. They're messing with my head. Speaking of sensitivity,
Hey, leave his antenna alone.
Speaking of sensitivity, they're super colourful. They always make me smile. There's the neighbours across the other side of the street who are always going, yeah, when the footy's on and stuff, and I love it. It's so much colour to the street, and I'll miss it when we move from here. But anyway, speaking
That's
of sensitivity,
good. No, we have some really lively neighbours, and in my worst moods, they annoy me. But even last night, I was like, you know what? I think those neighbors are probably closer to humans, how humans should be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like I want to be more like them, a bit rowdy, saying just feeling alive. He drinks wine and smokes cigarettes on his front porch. He's like this. The sentinel of the street with his family, and the mum screaming at the kids. It feels like life. It feels real. It feels good.
Yeah, like life. Like they're not behaving for the camera. They're living.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. A few of some other neighbours who are sort of more my I don't know, just they've found out that I do stuff on Instagram and social media. They go, "Oh, Darby, I saw that thing that you." That's funny. So now some of my neighbours know that I do shit on social media after talking to them about just normal stuff. And now it's weird. It's that weird, smalling of the world as you just. Yeah,
that was also the walls are closing in too.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Darby, thank you so much for coming on. And for anyone curious, his books are available and well worth the read. I'm building up quite a nice collection of Darby's poetry. And check out his podcast too. One of my favorites, actually, that I listen to while doing the dishes.
Oh, cheers, Josh. Ta.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Turek Books, and happy reading. See you next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Turek Books. Be sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, any kind of thing that could help us get listened to or watched by more people. We really appreciated having you, and hope to see you again next week with a new guest and plenty of books. Take care until then.